Beth, do you want to do a roll call, please?
And I've started the recording at 9:30, just to note that for the minutes. Austin, DiDonato is absent. Dombrowski,
Here.
Jacobson,
Sure.
Rosenthal,
Here.
and Todd.
Hello.
And for CCS, we have Deborah Wishmeyer, Rebecca Malinowski, and Beth Stormer.
Okay. Does anyone have any changes or additions to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to public comment. We have no members of the public present, but does there anyone from CCS want to make comment? I guess that's public. All right, on to the minutes of the January 18th meeting. Do we have a motion for approval?
So move.
I'll second. Jacobson.
Any discussion? All right, then we'll do a vote.
Austin,
Yes.
Dombrowski,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Rosenthal,
Yes.
and Todd.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the budget. Rick, I really like the format of the links into the online budget. I just think that makes it very easy.
Good, that's what I'm
Okay.
about. I'll go ahead and share my screen. And then just a quick summary, not too much has changed since the last time we looked at the budget draft. Your copy says draft 2. I updated, this says draft 3 just in case we make any edits during this meeting, so I don't mess up the last version. But there's nothing different here than what you have. So as discussed last time, library billings are flat. You will see the OCLC amount is increased here. This is still an estimate. We don't get the OCLC billings until essentially early May. So this includes both an annual uplift for OCLC as well as the anticipated cost for adding Warren Newport. So you can see that's a fairly significant jump from last year. We will have another library to share that out with, but I do anticipate OCLC fees will go up for most libraries in an amount about the same as Warren Newport will bring member fees down. So I do want to talk some more about that during the development fund discussion. So we'll get to that. We've updated the individual library charges just to be more reflective of, we just had a number in there since it's a pass through. So we've updated that number to be more accurate. And you can see matching expenditures are down here. So let's look. We can talk in more depth about some of the line items, especially if anyone has questions.
If I can point out
but-
one, and it's a formula, if you can scroll down to the bottom, Rebecca, the 25% revenue where it says 53,000.
Mhm.
That if you get rid of that 0, it'll put it in line with up at in the formula should be 0.25 instead of 0.025.
Oh, thank you.
It's nitpicky,
Thank
but
you. That's it. You know, if I actually
Just a
made,
bit of a difference.
yeah, just like a small amount. So I did want to talk about transfers to the development fund. We didn't budget for one this year in our existing 22-23. If you look, these are our 22-23 targets. So leaving our final operating fund balance at this $800,000 amount is within our guidelines here. We certainly have plenty of room to do a transfer. The same with next year's budget. There's room to do a transfer, but we don't have to. So as we talk more about the development fund next, and then the uses of the development fund list, I think there's some room to come back here and see if we want to make a change to this section. So before we talk about the development fund, are there any line items that folks had questions about? Again, nothing too significant changed from the last draft, but I'm happy to dive into anything.
I just wanted to know about the increase in professional development. Are you guys doing some conferences and things for staff?
Yeah, so we, during pre-COVID times, our professional development budget was like $30,000 to $40,000 a year. And then we, as everyone else did, significantly reduced it. So we are seeing now requests from staff to go to in-person conferences. So we're excited to be able to honor those and bring that knowledge back to the members. And then you'll also see we do have a small amount budgeted here for the amenities rentals in the office. So these are, we have a certain amount of comped room reservations in the new building, and then have small rental fees that we have to pay for room use. We also have a small hospitality budget we've added in because as we're welcoming folks to the office, we'd love to offer a little treat for folks. I'm just laughing because pre-COVID snacks were like a big deal at technical group meetings. It was like a whole thing, but we wanted to welcome people back in to our office and celebrate our space. So we added a small budget for that. But yes, the short answer is yes, we're going back to in-person conferences. So we have some more travel and registration fees.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Happy to see that.
Same. Other line items that folks have questions on?
I'm trying to remember from our conversation around salaries. Are we just gonna get to that later?
No, we can get into that now. That's this represents a 3% increase, but with some change to a projected position that we had budgeted previously. We could do staff increases still at like a 4%, or as we just, I think that's what we discussed at the last meeting. That's what I've got.
So you're saying that you're requesting a budget increase of 3%, but you're looking at staff increases of more than 3%.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have a position budgeted that was like a full-time professional position. And the more we look at it, it just doesn't seem like what we need. And Deborah and I are currently talking about the opportunity to bring in like a part-time position to do more like kind of base level ticket work, to then free up Mieko and Rachel to do the more in-depth work. I think we just didn't have enough for that next person.
Can I ask, I think it's only a 2.5% increase. This particular view is set to no decimal points, but on the main screen, it's at 2.5. I think it's just rounding up to 3 on the personnel screen.
That's it's because we're looking at my formula. No, budget change.
I think she's saying column H, if you extend the decimal, go to 2.5%.
Yeah, I'm just looking at why that is. And it's because I did the formula wrong is the answer.
No,
So
it says
here-
self-formatting it. If you do column H, if you go to right click format cells percentage, you can go how many decimal points you want to go to.
Yes, yeah, so I mean, Lauren's absolutely right, it's 2.5%. But because where I added the salary increase, I added it on our projected spend rather than our budgeted spend, is why that says 2%.
Hmm.
And it's not reflective of the full amount. I think.
Because on
Go ahead.
the, I think Lauren said on the, operating fund is 2.5%. So it's the number's wrong in both places.
Yes, because this number here, my projected number for 23-24, in general, I like the increase would be based on the budgeted number for 22-23, and I based the increase on the projected number for 22-23. So this is a larger increase over the projected, but because we're underspent this year. So I will look at that again.
I see what you mean. So you're basically saying, you know, it's a very small increase over budgeted, but a more significant increase over projected, which is the
Yes.
real number. So you're trying to get the budget number to be more the real number. So yeah,
Yes,
I think your numbers are all right. Just us understanding where you're basing them off of makes sense. So you're asking for a budgeted 2.5% increase, but in reality, a larger increase from what. So yeah, okay. I just want to make sure there's enough room for you to properly reward staff for a crazy. It's been another crazy year. Inflation.
yeah, I do want to take a minute to look at that and make sure that I didn't mess that up. I feel like I'm missing something here, so I'm gonna take another look at that. And then all of these need to be adjusted as well. So the goal is, I would say, like 4% increases for staff. Again, is that a reasonable goal? I see some nods on the committee, yes. Okay.
I guess are you your salary scale? Are you raising it 4% as well, or?
No, I think the salary scale will still adjust according to the HR source recommendation.
Has that come out yet? I don't even know what that is. Or
I
when that,
don't. Well, so we won't adjust it until January.
Hmm.
So it comes out in November. So
Oh.
we're like off schedule. So we do our increases in July, but the salary scale is adjusted in January. So the
So-
last increase to the salary scale was like 2 things. Yeah.
really?
So I anticipate that will be similar. So we're moving folks up in the salary scale. And with the exception of one staff member, there's plenty of room to do that. We do have one staff member who's at her position salary cap. So we've been doing a bonus for her in the amount equal to the increase that she would receive.
Okay,
So I will take another look at this personnel section. I have a separate worksheet, so I'll go back to my worksheet and see what I did. But our target is 4% increases for staff and still leaving room for that additional position to bring in additional ticket support. Maybe that's right. And then we see a small decrease in our projected or like our estimated budget for insurance, but we are seeing an actual spend that is lower. The projection includes the opportunity for folks to change their elections. I'll take another pass at that number as well, because it still seems kind of high. We had 2 staff members moved to the HSA plan. 1 staff member dropped from family coverage to spouse coverage. And then I left our insurance, so we should have some more room to bring that down. That doesn't. So I get some budget version problems. So I'll double check that number as well. And then I do have a small increase to the personal equipment reimbursement, which is for on-call, cell phone and internet use, just to reflect increasing prices on literally everything everywhere. So maintenance agreements is our other big. We've got this budget number in here is almost certainly going to come out. We are discussing. So in the new space, the building provides staff with hard keys for the office, the regular traditional key for our specific office space, but staff also will have a key fob, a swipe to get into the building off hours or to access amenities. So if we want to upgrade our space to be compatible with that fob system, there is an annual subscription for that. It's not included in our lease. We have to contract with the buildings contractor to do it. We are waiting. At this time, I think it's an expense that isn't really worth the added convenience for staff because folks will continue to work from home at least, half the time, if not more. So the value of like having to carry 1 key instead of 2 keys doesn't seem like it's there. But what we are waiting for right now is some information from the building. If we did want to add a card reader in the future, there's some work that has to be done in terms of wiring. So we may have them do that wiring now. So we want to get the cost for like any of that work. Essentially, this might come out. It's in there right now. I don't know. It's like right on the edge to me of a reasonable cost. So if anyone has any thoughts on that, I'm happy to hear it, but not a huge amount of money, but it's enough that I'm annoyed at how much it costs.
Would this be an annual fee?
This year would be higher because it would include the install, which is pretty hefty. The annual fee would be about $2,000.
And it would be a 3-year agreement that we would have to sign.
Thank you, Beth. Yes.
I don't particularly have feelings about it. I mean, we have, obviously key card access for staff here, but we have, a lot more staff. So, it's convenient when you have a lot of people. You can just deactivate a key card versus collecting a key again. CCS is not in the same situation. So,
right.
I understand if you'd want it for the convenience and would support that. And
yeah, I just like, well, we'll see. Like, we'll just see where the numbers no. My argument against it was it's over the 3-year period, it's like $400 per employee. And if it was like, I was going to give you $400 to improve your workspace, would you pick having a swipe instead of a swipe and a key, or would you pick something else? And I feel like most staff would say something else. That is a thing that's in here.
I think that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
And that'll guide you in determining whether to finally do it.
Yeah. So again, how
many people do you have going into the building and how often, Rebecca?
Right now, we really only have 2 staff that, well, 3 if you count me, that are regularly working in office. I am hoping that we get some additional takers on that when we're in the new space. Our current space, I don't know if you've been there, Monica, it's been
I
a minute.
haven't.
It's just like a very unpleasant place to be.
It sounds hideous, to be
Yeah.
honest.
That's a good word. Yeah.
Very seasonal we're like, oh, it's flying ant season. The flying ants are gonna start dropping on our desks. It's just like a real bummer. So I personally am planning to be in the office more when we are in the new space. I know Beth is planning to be in office a little bit more regularly, but most staff are still very happy working from home. And we are talking about having specific in-office days, but most staff will keep working remotely half or more time.
Yeah, I mean, just based on that, my vote would be forego the card reader if you can to save the money, because it just doesn't seem like it makes sense for the volume of people, but that's just me.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at. Like, we've had to rekey our current space maybe like twice in 7 years. Like, once we did just because it hadn't been done in a million years, and then once we did because we had a lost key, and like that cost $300, and we have a whole bunch of doors. So if we had to rekey the new space where we have 1 door, like certainly less than $2,000 a year. So
Yeah.
that is where I'm leaning. I don't know why this one is so hard for me to just like rip the Band-Aid and say we don't need it. I don't know. But
Well, just to let you know, I have 2 branches, and my one branch has 10 people working there, and we have no fob system whatsoever. It is key only. And it's been working fine, and those people are in the building all the time. So again, Winnetka has more people here, and we have a fob system, which I think makes sense. But just if you need some logic to help convince yourself either way.
Yes, I really appreciate it. Yes, agree.
Does the cost go up if you don't do it now? Since you're not in there, does the cost go up? Like, if you don't, it's $4,000 now. If you're like, oh, in 2 years, we really want to do this, it would be like 8,000 or.
So that's what we're checking on with the building, in terms of, because the building has to add some wiring from the door to the server room. So we're talking about having the building do that prep work now, and that so that if in the future we wanted to add the fobs, like if everyone's in the office all the time and it's a thing, that we wouldn't incur an additional cost to go back and reopen drywall and do wiring. But in terms of the subscription cost, that would be the same. It's just the service is the same, whether we're in 2 days a week or every day. Is that what you were asking, Meg?
Yeah, I guess I lean the other way. Is like, if you already got ripping up drywall is such a pain, and staff, like if you can do it now and it's not going to disrupt anybody's workflow, just get it done. Rip off the Band-Aid that way, and that way you've got it, and just incur the cost to get it done, because there's likelihood that you might need it in 3 or 4 or 5 years. You're planning on being in this location, what, 10 years, 12 years, whatever. So I don't know. That's just I always feel like before you move in, do all the work, because it's really a pain to do the work.
Yeah, and so what we're hoping to do is essentially lay the groundwork now, and then like not actually install the box and activate the server, but that if in the future we wanted to, it would just be like dropping in the box and connecting the wires instead of rerunning them. But we're still waiting from the building to hear about that.
The cost to do that work.
Yeah, so almost certainly it would be less to do that now than in the future. So that may be the middle ground that we take is, prep. And then if we want to make the leap in the future, we're ready to do it.
Rebecca, can I ask a question about this topic? The one thing that I like about the access card reader is the functionality of being able to program it for new employees or employees who leave, as well as like to deactivate a card, as well as reporting we would know when employees are in, if we needed to be able to track that. I mean, we're such a small organization, but we won't know when anyone is in the space if everyone is just using a key, because they don't have to use a fob to enter the building unless it's off hours, and we probably wouldn't have access to that reporting anyway. So I guess the question I would ask is there any concern with us losing that functionality of being able to identify when folks are in the office? Right now, our doors are also key, but we have the alarm system. So we always know when someone has entered the space and deactivated the alarm. Now, if someone else enters it and the alarm isn't set, we wouldn't know. But I guess that's the only concern I have with not going with the access card reader, is losing that functionality. And I'd like to know if there's any pros and cons with that, for those of you who have it.
So.
Or
if you're
Monica, it sounded like one of your branches doesn't have that. So do you?
There haven't been any concerns with that. You know, from my perspective, again, I have a great staff and I trust them explicitly. So there haven't been any kind of issues where I thought, oh, maybe we really should, you know, have a fob system here. Now, that being said, we're going to do an expansion project in the next year or so where we're going to double the size of my branch. And we're going to have 2 different entries. So I will likely install a fob system at that point, because it will make sense, and I will have to take on more staff for that location. So, I mean, I just feel like it's more, you know, do you trust your people? And what's the volume of people that are going in and out, and how often? So, but I agree with Mick. If you think you're gonna potentially use it at some point, I would do it now before you move in, because that's always easier and less disruptive if you do it ahead of time.
Yeah,
And if
Mick's point is well taken. The other thing, so we're in the middle of a construction project now where we are installing, you know, strike doors. Not all doors with keys will take an electronic strike, not all exterior doors, not all interior doors. So, yeah, I mean, that might matter with, you know, what you're having done right now.
Yeah, so we are working with the building on this. We'll get an update, and hopefully soon they're like moving forward with the project. So I appreciate the feedback on this, and I will strive to make a decision within the next week, mostly because I feel like we have talked about it for $6,000 of talking. The other thing I wanted to draw your attention to here is the Comprise subscription. So for this fiscal year, we were able to come to an agreement for a half of the year subscription to Comprise. So libraries have plenty of time to transition to either their own Comprise agreement or to an ePay or other account. So they can take their time and make an informed, comfortable decision. And that is included in our budget here. One thing that's relatively new in our budget is pulling out the bank fees. Previously, we just honestly like didn't record them. It was like just deducted and we recorded our net interest. But I wanted to keep better track of them because it's so hard to see what everything is when, you know, it's just like, I don't know, here's the statement, everything's great. So I wanted to just have an annual look and be able to track this. So these are not new fees, it's just tracking them in the budget. And then over here in capital, we are this year projected to be a little bit overspent. We are buying new training laptops. So we can use them for Warren Newport and Mount Prospect. They weren't slated for repurchase until next year, but with bringing Warren Newport on this year, why not get that extra use out of them since we'll be doing more training. So we adjusted that spend. And then, so the other decision that we did make regarding the move is that we are going to decommission the co-location space. So currently we pay about $10,500 a year for the co-location space at the Schaumburg Police Department. And it's our servers that are there that we manage, and we own the servers, but it's in their space. And we moved to that model right before I started at CCS, or right at the time I was starting. I don't exactly remember. Because our current building had so many problems with power outages. Like every time the wind blew, we would lose power, so libraries would go down. So the co-location space has served us really well, but we've reduced the number of servers we have, as we're now a hosted customer with Polaris. What we have at the colo space is less value to the libraries, but less impact on the day-to-day operations. So we researched looking at sort of like 100% cloud-based hosted, just, renting server space in the cloud and moving all of our non-Polaris servers that way. We looked at other like rented, there's server farms where you can rent physical servers in physical buildings, but you aren't responsible for the hardware, like that's all managed for you. And then we looked at purchasing new hardware and managing it in-house. So we did determine that the most cost-effective option, at least at this time for our configuration, is to manage in-house. So we'll remove the co-location with our move. We'll cancel that agreement. And we'll move our existing servers to the new space. And then next budget cycle, we will replace some aging hardware, a firewall, and our big server that we use for reporting, our web report server. So it is a costly server. That said, the cost over, anywhere from 3 to 7 years, it was still much better to purchase the new server than to try to rent the server space, either in the cloud or in a physical location. So that was a question we had open at the last meeting that we have successfully made a decision on. So I think this will be a nice savings for libraries. It'll make maintenance easier for Bob and Marcin to have it in our office instead of in a second location. And I think it's going to provide good service and cost savings. That is
Has
good.
to be done. No one likes to pay for servers, but it has to be done,
It does. Yeah. I was like, oh, but this rental seems so good. We don't have to worry about hardware or upkeep or anything, but the costs were even higher than Marcin anticipated they would be right now. So we'll just do it. We talked about this rent spreadsheet at the last meeting. Rent is artificially low next year, and we've got some numbers here to show you what it will be in the future, but we'll adjust for that. It's still a significant savings over our current rent, for sure. Electronic resources, this increase includes adding Warren Newport to our subscription, as well as a small annual increase. So that is why it is 7% instead of 2%. Which brings us, unless there are other questions about any specific line items, to our development fund section. So this year we'll get half of the investment from Warren Newport, and we'll get the second half next year. We'll also see the investment from Mount Prospect in the next fiscal year. So we've got that budgeted here. This is another reason I didn't budget a transfer, is because we will have some income based on that, but we again can do the transfer. We have the Vega software scheduled in here. Whether or not we will go live with it, I don't know, but we have the funds earmarked here in the budget for it. Site improvements, this is the move. So this includes paying for the movers, new furniture. We're reusing our furniture where we can and then adding on in some areas. All these like incidental costs that we've got. Everything is kind of bundled in there. We've got our Rails pass-through grant. So looking at our list of development fund uses, our guidelines say that we want to keep between 75 and 150% of the total potential development fund uses in the development fund. And we'll look at the development fund list as well. So we're kind of right in the middle of those guidelines. So we don't have to initiate we don't have to initiate a rebate. We don't have to do a transfer. We can do either of them. But this is a little bit out of order, but I'd like to pull up that development fund list now to look at, because I think it all kind of ties together. So let me swap a room. So this is the updated list. So the updates from last year's list include moving the office space relocation to recently completed, and then adding in this BTCAT or other OCLC alternative pilot, which I will give you a short rundown on. So I think we all know that OCLC is a very expensive tool and also very valuable to our libraries, right? Like it does a lot for us, and there's not, Rails has done a lot of work into viable alternatives for OCLC and, you know, what can we do about the contract and all these things. And the short answer is kind of like nothing really. Baker and Taylor has a fairly new product called BTCAT that seems pretty robust and looks really promising. OCLC, as you know, provides us through the group services contract with the state with both cataloging and interlibrary loan services, as including exposing our holdings through WorldCat, being able to set our holdings through batch processes. It does a lot of stuff. So OCLC costs, as you know, like $350,000 a year for all of our members. B&T CAT, 3 years of B&T CAT for all of our members would be $80,000 total for all of our members. But it does not provide that interfacing with WorldCat, right, which is an OCLC product. So whether or not we could set our holdings is a current question for debate with OCLC. It doesn't provide interlibrary loan service. So, you know, if your libraries right now are using OCLC, like they'd have to do direct requests or something else to get material that CCS doesn't own. And then the other piece that's missing from B&T CAT right now is the ability to create authority records in Library of Congress. So we've got staff at CCS and in CCS libraries that are NACO trained. So if there's a heading missing, like an author heading missing for a debut author, our staff can create that Library of Congress heading and submit it through NACO. That is not currently possible with BTCAT. We are currently wrestling with OCLC to get a quote for services outside of the group services contract, or just those pieces that we would need to fill in the gaps that moving to BTCAT would create. OCLC does not want to give us that quote. We had a meeting with like everyone from OCLC, and they're like, well, you can't do that. And we're like, but we can, because you make the rules. So give us what we want. Anyway, so I added a pilot to the development fund uses BT-CAT will offer us a 6-week trial free of charge, but I think trying to work out staff workflows will take longer than that. And I'd be interested in getting, 1 to 3 libraries. Like we still subscribe to OCLC. We're still doing our OCLC thing, but to get some libraries committed to, this like a pilot, like, all right, what if I don't use OCLC for 6 months or a year? What does that mean for my library, and how does that, impact our workflows? So that is a project we have in the hopper. We don't have all the details worked out, but I wanted to include that in the potential uses for the development fund, because I think if in the long run we can save $300,000 a year for our members, like that's pretty good, and we should do that. As you know, OCLC really has a lock on some of these services. So whether or not this will work, I don't know. And that is why we have it slated as a pilot. I don't think we'd need to spend all $80,000. I think Baker and Taylor would be happy to do a shorter agreement or modified pricing for a pilot, but I have it in here in case that's not an option. And then another OCLC piece that I just started thinking about this week and don't have, I would like some general feedback on whether we should try to put a number on it or not, is offsetting costs when new members join for OCLC. So you may have seen that when some new members join, your OCLC fees go down. And when other new members join, your OCLC fees go up. And that is due to OCLC's pricing structure that is not transparent and not based in reality and is very frustrating. So when Warren Newport joins, they are currently overpaying for OCLC per the CCS distribution. So folks are going to see an increase in their OCLC fees. Mount Prospect, on the other hand, is underpaying. So it's like, all right, you're going to see an increase when OCLC joins, but then Mount Prospect's going to come on and, that's going to balance out, and you're going to see a decrease, and you're going to kind of like be back to that middle ground. A fun new wrinkle is that Waukegan, who's very interested in CCS membership, is not currently an OCLC member. There is no existing quote for Waukegan as an OCLC member. So we are trying to get a quote from OCLC. We may or may not ever get it. I don't know. But, are they going to say it's $60,000 a year for Waukegan to be an OCLC member? And now we have to redistribute that amongst our members. Or what if we do if they're not an OCLC member? OCLC says that that's not allowed, but that just doesn't make sense. So I'd like to look at some scenarios where we use development fund fees to help balance those costs. Maybe it's, it was great when Palatine joined with their teeny tiny OCLC fees and everyone saw a break. But if, when Morton Grove joined, they were paying like almost 10 times what they should have been paying for OCLC, and everyone took a hit on that. So if we could balance those fees out, even for like spread it over 3 years or something, to help libraries ease into or limit the amount of a bump anyone will see, I think that would be a good use of funds. But as I said, I literally just thought of this on Wednesday and have not had time to think through what those spreadsheets even need to look like to figure out. And I didn't want to invest a bunch of time in it if you guys were like, well, that's weird, that's just subsidizing whatever, and I don't want to do it, and don't spend time on that. So I'm going to stop talking and see what the committee says.
Do we have feelings on the ripping off the Band-Aid OCLC method that's currently employed? Potential changes?
I like anything that can stick it to OCLC myself. Any alternative to that, because I think part of why they have a monopoly is because no one's developed anything that can touch what they're doing. And so if Baker and Taylor is trying to enter that arena, with their little gladiator helmet on, then I say, you know, I'm fine investing money to look at alternative things. I'd volunteer my person, but I have a one-person department and she'd kill me. But I like that. And I also like your other idea to potentially offset costs of new people joining. I mean, the whole fee structure continues to be nebulous to me. Like you were talking about, why do some libraries pay $1 bazillion and some pay almost nothing? And why can't we get any clear information about it? So, I mean, I feel like once you join up, like there should be just a consortium fee and it shouldn't be based on individual libraries anymore. But what do I know? I just run a library, right? So, so I like both of your ideas, Rebecca, and totally support pursuing both with the development fund.
Me too. And I'd be willing to be one of the 3 or 4. I'd be willing to ask my staff if they can take on being one of the 3 or 4 pilot programs when we get to that point. And I don't think you'll have a dearth of people willing to participate in any kind of project that, like I think Lauren was saying, sticks it to OCLC.
Yeah, I agree. I'm on the same page with all this. I guess my concern, and I love the use of the development funds to offset the costs of the other folks, just to keep things consistent across the board. I think that meets the description of what development is, kind of broadly about what we're doing with CCS. My concern is maybe more about the B&T product. Obviously, it's a new thing. It's an alternative. It's piloting. I'm a B&T shop, and we've had some issues with B&T over the past couple of years, and we even were flirting with looking at a different vendor. For those who have multiple vendors, is it irrelevant? It's just their product, it's their brand. It doesn't matter whether or not they're your vendor. Is that a contingency for a decision about that?
I don't believe so. I don't think it needs, you don't have to like be a B&T shop for B&T Cat. But I will confirm that Rachel is developing a thorough report. I love Rachel's reports. They are very detailed. We're also looking at, Innovative has a product called Sky River. Naperville and Elgin use Sky River. My general impression is so far Rachel likes BT Cat better, but I will get some more details on that. So it is listed here, BT Cat or other OCLC alternative pilot, but so there are other options too, but we will keep in mind that we want to be vendor agnostic in terms of where you purchase your materials from.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's make sure, right, because this is a larger question than just approval of the budget, that this is explained, you know, whenever we do get to governing board, that you know what all this entails, and especially the vendor agnostic portion of it. We are an Ingram shop, so yeah, I don't know that we use Baker and Taylor hardly at all, so yeah, we'd want to make sure that it's for everyone.
Yes,
it would work for them all.
Deborah, do you know? I'm making assumptions that they want to be as useful as possible, but I don't know.
You are correct. It is vendor agnostic, so they'll catalog any material regardless of where you purchased it from. So it shouldn't be an issue that we have libraries that use Ingram versus B&T. We can ask maybe some more specific details around that if we do a pilot.
I'm sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
Have you seen example record sets of what, you know, or not, whatever, the catalog records, you know, kind of compare them side by side? Is it pretty comparable?
I know I have not looked at this in detail, but I know that Rachel has. So what B&T Cat does is some of their larger customers, like San Francisco and LA Public, customers they have an agreement where you can ingest records from those larger library systems. So they estimate that like coverage is about 85 to 90% of what exists in OCLC. But as for like the quality of the records, I don't know. That might be a question I would defer to Rachel.
Yeah, Rachel, again, is working on a pretty comprehensive report on this, which is not done yet. I was like, oh, I'm gonna put this in the budget. She's like, well, what about all these things? I'm like, it's just like on the list. So she will provide us all with some more information on that. I do think, Deborah, let's make a note if and when we're ready to talk about pilot stuff, that we make sure to include a non-D&T library as a pilot. But I mean, for $300,000, could we purchase everything that libraries get from OCLC in a year? I mean, it's a pretty small amount that actually gets escalated up that way. So I do think we really have some options. That lack of NACO functionality is a bit of a stickler. CCS has taken a lot of pride over the years in our authorities' work. Mount Prospect coming in, they are like authorities. Yeah, all right, Anthony knows. So Baker and Taylor is planning to add that functionality, but we don't have a timeline on that yet. So it's possible we could, if a pilot is, successful and we love it and want to move forward, we could tie that development into a contract or something. But cool. I think so. Rachel's going to keep doing her work on, her OCLC stuff. We're going to keep trying to get a quote from OCLC for reduced services. And then I'm going to work on some projections, numbers on what it would look like to offset OCLC fee changes, like how that could shake out. Trying to figure out how to write that in my notes to do OCLC stuff. Because poor Waukegan. I was talking with Tiffany and she's like, well, if our OCLC fee is really high, would you not take us? And I was like, well, I don't want to not take someone because of OCLC. I don't want that. So I do think we need to have some mechanisms in place to help. And I think this is a good option. So I will work on that. Is there anything else that the committee would want to see on this list or taken off this list? Again, this is not a binding list of things that we are going to do. It's just per our fiscal accountability policy at the recommendation of our auditor. If we're carrying funds in our development fund, we need to demonstrate that we have a potential use for them and we're not just keeping all the library's money so we can do nefarious things.
I have a more general question, Rachel. You talked about whether we should transfer money to the development fund. Do you have a different investment strategy for the development fund from the operations fund? And would it be beneficial to transfer more money to the development fund to be able to earn a greater interest, since you're not planning on using, I don't know if the operating funds in the checking account and developments and money market are investments?
That's a great question. Our accounts are not tied specifically to our funds. So we currently are maintaining a relatively lean balance on what we call our operating fund in the bank. It's our checking account. And most of our operating fund balance is actually in our money market savings account, earning that interest. We do also have an Illinois funds account that is we've kept a pretty minimal balance in there. It is the same interest that our Wintrust money market account is. So no, we don't have a different investment strategy for the two funds.
Okay, that answers that question. Thank you.
What is the interest that you're earning in the money market account, Rebecca?
That is a good question that I do not know the answer to off the top of my head. It is indexed to Illinois funds.
Yeah, Illinois funds is like at 4.1 or 4.606, right? Last time I checked was on Sunday. Wintrust reached out to us too, and it was the same deal. I'm like, oh, that'd be better than what I'm earning right now in my checking account. So yeah.
So we did an RFP for banking, and Wintrust is actually offering us above the Illinois funds rate in the money market too. So there is some room in there, which was very nice to discover.
Are you guys going to go with Wintrust?
Yeah. Yeah, the interest net of fees beat everybody else.
Right. Back to Rebecca.
Yes, so looking at the development fund, not including this potential offset for OCLC stuff, our total potential spending out of the development fund is this $440,000. So that's what those balances are based on over in our development fund sheet. Yeah, so you see this number matches. So adding OCLC offsets to the development fund list will change these ending balance guidelines, but I don't think it will change them significantly that like all of a sudden we need more money in the development fund. Like that's not a thing I anticipate happening. So the short story is I was hoping that we would not need to have another meeting after this for budget approval, but I think that it would be beneficial. One, because there's a couple of lines in here that I need to check, and two, to give me a chance to do some of that OCLC work in the event that we want to budget it in for next year. Hopefully I can get a quote for Waukegan because they ideally would like to join with Mount Prospect. So that could be starting, relatively soon. So I don't know how, I think we can, I feel bad asking you to schedule another meeting, but a little less bad because it's online. So, I will turn that over to Lauren to
I say just
facilitate.
blame an additional meeting on me in case we have further discussion on ACH payments, so.
It doesn't seem like we're ready to take action on the budget or the development fund list right this minute, right? Okay.
So my only note on the development fund, I just, because the move is mid-June, do you want to put some money in there in case something else comes up in the new space, just in case?
Yes, that is a great idea. I will do that.
Okay, so we've covered 6 and 7?
I think so.
Nice. And Beth, you'll send out a poll for an additional meeting. Super.
Yes.
Okay. CCS ePay account.
So at our last meeting and at executive committee, we've talked a lot about like CCS is going to set up this ePay account. And I did, which is great. It's up, it's running, it's wonderful. But we've never actually had anyone approve me just like setting up a new account. So I talked with Heidi and we felt that it could come to budget and finance for approval just to authorize the establishment of the ePay account, including any, related accounts that need to happen. Again, they're already set up, but just so we can document that I'm not going rogue creating bank accounts for CCS. I have a potential motion to take changes to that.
What happens if we say no? What will you do? I'm
I
joking.
think it-
You can say yes, but I'm just wondering.
I think it might be beneficial
Don't get
to,
me.
I think it might be beneficial for this to sort of encompass the conversion from comprise to,
Check pay.
yeah, because what we've got is the suggested motion is solely on e-pay, but maybe tack on and with the intention of eliminating comprise as a payment processor, the purpose of the e-pay.
So are you saying just to include that that CCS is creating this to enable libraries to do that, or to require or are you saying that motions should be like all the libraries are going to do this thing?
Oh, no, I wouldn't want to require anything, but the reason why CCS was doing it was to get away from comprise. So sort of
Yes.
explaining in the motion that we would also be phasing out comprise. Right, just like we're only doing 6 more months, CCS
Got
is
it.
only paying for comprise for six more months. So we would be in effect saying we are stopping one and starting another kind of a thing.
Okay, yes, agreed.
And on those very, very vague ideas, does someone have a motion to make?
I'll do it.
Okay.
I move approval that we migrate from comprise to authorize establishment of an Illinois ePay account for CCS, including any additional accounts for agreements required by Illinois ePay, and initial funding of $500 to be sent from the CCS operating account at Wintrust Bank to the INB sweep account.
Perfect, thank you. And a second.
I'll second that beautiful motion.
Can we have a vote, please, Beth?
Austin,
Yes.
Dombrowski,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Rosenthal,
Yes.
and Todd.
Aye.
Misty?
Okay, thank you so much. That was perfect, Anthony. All right,
Oh,
the next
that motion
item,
sheet's nice.
our next item was added on, and is just for discussion right now on, after I was at CCS on Wednesday and signed checks. I signed the check for payment to Innovative for more than $300,000. And I was struck because I'm not sure how much you're aware of the a lot of check fraud that's going on right now among libraries when large check payments are being sent out, they're being stolen from post office boxes. Those checks are then used to open new accounts under the business name that's on the check. And then the check is deposited, the account is immediately closed, and the funds are diverted. So this was a big topic conversation among business managers at their November, December meeting. And then in January, our architecture firm had literally every one of their checks from libraries stolen in January. So this is it made me worried then about the $300,000 check. And it reminded me, because I'm the treasurer of the WIN, of the Wellness Insurance Network, that we converted to ACH because we were physically mailing $500,000 checks to Blue Cross Blue Shield every month, that those in the mail were probably not the most prudent thing to do. So we converted, and because both organizations, CCS and WIN, are using Wintrust, we know that it's very easy to change from a 2-signature check process to a 2-signature ACH verification process using push ACH, right? So Beth would initiate the ACH on the Wintrust website, and Rebecca and I, or Heidi, or whatever, the officers would then go into the Wintrust website and authorize the approval of the ACH. So we would be maintaining all of our current internal controls. The auditor would be still happy with this process, and we would prevent checks getting lost at the post office. So my initial fear, and I have no idea why I didn't think of this, was we can't be sending those $300,000 checks out every month. And we send that check once a year. So it is not as big a concern as what I initially had, because it's just the one check and Beth is gonna take care of that one. It's an immediate thing is don't send the check in a window envelope so people don't know that there's a check in the envelope, blah, blah, blah. So this is something that we're looking at improving in the future, but it's not something of pressing importance right now. And so does anyone have, questions or like ideas of ACH improvements, or God forbid, has any of this happened to you? Have you lost checks?
We lost nothing that large, but we lost a $15,000 check to Computer View that got washed and cashed in West Virginia. And it turns out we're never liable on that. If the bank that cashes a bad check is liable. And so we got all the money back, and that's the deal that they have with it. But then we also had a couple of checks that were stolen and were sent to freelance writers. And we got like 5 of these back. It was interesting. And they all seemed normal. They're like, hey, we're doing a conference on some medical condition that's a legitimate medical condition. We want you to write the brochure for it. And they're negotiating, and they're like, oh yeah, well, we'll just send you a check for $5,000. Like, well, we haven't decided on it. Fortunately, these people, most of them, said this is not right, and so they contacted us. So we know. So we've been working on going through ACH. We're with Wintrust. It's not as simple. I think it might depend on who you work with to get the thing set up. But we are in our 2nd month of ACH. This is going to be March is going to be our 3rd month, and we're over half of our checks are now ACH, which is good. We're never going to get 100%, I don't think. And we're kind of surprised at who has refused to sign up. You can't make our vendors sign up. It's their choice. ILA does not do ACH. So we'll always be sending checks to ILA. But I definitely think it's worth pursuing. And I think it is good while, just keep talking with our accountant, keep talking with our auditor to make sure that the processes we're in, that we're maintaining, like Lauren was talking about, and sounds like that's exactly right. We're just maintaining the same level of checks and balances. I think a big one that we had to make sure was the person who inputs new vendors is not the same person who authorizes the checks to be sent. And so we have 2 people that do that. Again, just so you don't have somebody who creates a new person, sends the checks, and then deletes that person again, because that's a potential issue. So yeah, so like if Beth inputs the new vendors, and then after the board meeting or when all the checks are signed and approved, Rebecca is the one that hits the send button. That's how you split that up. So
We just had a presentation from Wintrust, and I don't know, Rebecca, they told you that something about integrated payables. And Lauren, maybe you already know about this, but you basically send them your I'm paraphrasing this. You basically send them your QuickBook file, and then they send the checks or the ACHs or even wire or virtual cards, if people want that. And I don't know how much it costs or anything, like I'm just doing, but I was like, okay, that's really interesting, because then you don't even have to set up the ACH, because and if the person doesn't have the ACH, they send the check. And so all the risk is on them. There's obviously a fee, but basically and then they deduct it from your account. And so it was fascinating. Basically you just said, these are our payables. These are their contact information, do the paying. And I don't know if that's an option that you've looked into as well with this. This is just a conversation. So it's called Wintrust integrated payables. And when they presented that to me, I was really interested in that, because I'm like, I don't know how that works in QuickBooks. I'm not a QuickBooks expert, but my finance manager would say, I'm not sure how that works, because usually we say what checks are aligned with what stuff. And I assume they just send back the file and we reintegrate it into ours. But it's something I thought was fascinating. Instead of having to do what Alex said and do all the ACH payments, you just send them all to them after your treasurer signs off on the document or whatever.
thank you for that plug, because on March 15th, Wintrust is offering a training seminar on integrated payables. 7:30, coffee and pastry and, you know, boring financial training on this. But, you know, I'm going to be there. I think that it's, I'd love to be able to, as you say, use it, you know, for all those, all the transactions, not, you know, like you don't have to have ACH that they would send a check, then their check. So yeah, just another level of security.
I nominate Lauren to go to this event and then report back to us.
Done.
Hey, Lauren, can you send me the link or the information on that meeting?
Yep, I'll do that right. Yep,
Be curious too, Lauren.
I'll send it to y'all.
Thank you.
So Rebecca, from my point of view, whatever you do to make it easier on Beth and you, and the treasurer, because I had to go in and, you know, emergency sign things one time or whatever it was, and happy to do it. It didn't bother me in the slightest. I got to listen to a podcast for 45 minutes without kids screaming at me. That was wonderful. But anything that simplifies your lives and also alleviates risk to CCS as a whole is a good thing.
But
Agreed, yes. Beth and I will talk about the seminar. I probably will not go to any in-person events next week to keep my potential COVID germs at home, but I am interested in the topic for sure, and we can maybe request a separate demo or info from Wintrust if Beth can't attend.
good plan.
Yeah, so I am going to, for our next meeting, work on a draft policy. Our current ACH policy is designed around pull ACHs and has limits on it that would make this untenable for us. So I'll have a draft policy for review at our next meeting. So we can get that policy in place and then do a rollout that as it is not urgent. As we add new vendors, we can work with them on ACH setup and do that moving forward. So that is our plan there, although I'm excited to learn more about integrated payments and potential for making this even easier. I love it.
And on Alex's point too, we'll talk about this. But yeah, how important it is on adding vendors, and also equally essential updating routing and account numbers, because that's another big point of ACH fraud. Is a company sends an email saying, oh, we updated our bank account. So you got to have 2-person verification of any ACH changes. There's you know, if there's a way to steal money, people come up with it. So trying to, you know, figure out ways to prevent them from stealing is just never ending. So good. All right, if that's it, we'll look forward to the poll and we can schedule our next meeting. And thank you, Beth, for getting this all together, and Deborah for getting this all together, and Rebecca for getting the, you know, all the budget and the me throwing ACH at you at the absolute last minute for it together.
Love it.
Very good. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, do we need a motion to adjourn?
I think
We are adjourning at 10:43. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Everyone.